and taking it home to conduct various experiments in churning and cheese-making with Rachel's help. And Othniel dared to dream, and he said to himself, "There'll come a day when I will establish a small modern dairy here, and I'll plant vineyards too, and the winery I set up will surpass that of my former neighbor, and I'll show him what's what, him and his Dordogne." The World Zionist Organization's settlement division required Othniel's signature for a 20-kilowatt power generator, and he then requested a permit for a guard hut, following an incident with the neighboring Ishmaelites who had plundered the fruits of his labor. Armed with his Desert Eagle Mark VII pistol, Othniel stood guard now and then, but for the most part the hut remained empty. After all, his harvest had been raided just that one time, after which he rounded up some guys from the settlement, drove into the center of Carmish, fired some shots in the air, and issued a stern warning to any villager who dared to do the same again. One member of the posse was Uzi Shimoni, an imposing Jew with a beard to match and a deep-seated devotion to the land of Israel. Years earlier, he had studied with Othniel at the same yeshiva high school in Jerusalem, before Othniel left his religious studies in favor of full and active military service in an elite combat unit. Shimoni appealed to Othniel's heart and urged him to establish a formal settlement on his land. Othniel, however, was reluctant, because his permit pertained only to a farming enterprise and a guard hut. "Don't you worry," said Shimoni. "But where will you get the money for homes and construction and transport?" Othniel asked. "I've organized a donation from a good Miami Jew," replied Shimoni. At the time, Othniel was planning to build a permanent home in Ma'aleh Hermesh, but had run into a seemingly endless web of red tape with the council engineer, a troublesome neighbor, and a corrupt real estate attorney. "Screw them all," he finally said to Rachel. He'd had his fill of the exhausting bureaucracy, the sleepy, complacent bourgeoisie of Ma'aleh Hermesh, and the daily walk to and from his plot of land, a mile in each direction. He loved the hilltop, the winds, the ancient landscape, and he longed for the pioneering spirit of his youth, the sorties into Hebron and Kiryat Arba, the visits down south to Yamit before the Sinai town's dramatic evacuation, the Sabbaths spent in settlements reeling from the barrage of Arab terror during the First Intifada, the stormy protests against the Oslo Accords when he and his fellow demonstrators faced off against club-wielding riot police and water cannons. Othniel gave in to the urgings of Uzi Shimoni, who had somehow gotten his hands on a pair of 22-square-meter trailers, one of which Othniel, with the help of an expert welder, connected to the office warehouse container and the guard hut, and turned into a home for his family. The Shimonis settled in the second trailer. The two men went off together to the registrar of non-profit organizations in Jerusalem to set up an NPO, naming it the Hermesh Cooperative Farming Association. Next came the clearing of an access road to the hilltop. Giora, the brigade commander of the sector and a friend of Othniel from his military days, claimed to have been unaware of the newly cleared route, which ran, invisible from the main road, from Ma'aleh Hermesh B down through the deep, dry riverbed and up the hill. Soon afterward, however, following a call to a friend in the National Infrastructures Ministry, the Public Works Department erected safety guardrails along the dangerously steep makeshift road. The brigade commander told later of receiving a call on his two-way radio one cold winter night with a report of 5 new 22-square-meter prefab trailers that had been set up on the land adjacent to the Assis farm. He arrived on the scene to find several trucks and trailers at the site. The settlers, he said, blocked his command car from approaching. The head of the regional council turned up, things got heated, and the brigade commander, who came under a barrage of abuse, called the civil administration for advice on how to proceed. The new trailers, he was told, were there without a permit. However, their removal too required authorization, which they didn't have, and thus